You can mock me for thinking I'm a member of a church that was started by Jesus, and I could do the same thing to you. I could say, wow, it's laughable that someone thinks the Catholic Church is the church started by Jesus. But see, I don't think of myself as a Church of Christ apologist. I think of myself as a Christian apologist. I defend the three foundations of the Christian faith: the existence of God, the divine inspiration of the Bible, the deity of Jesus Christ. But I don't stop there. I defend doctrine and practice, and of course, my understanding is doctrine and practice is found in the New Testament exclusively. The description of the Church of Christ is if it's not in the Bible, these people are not going to do it. Now, I don't consider myself a member of a denomination, but that's what the denominational handbook of churches says about the Church of Christ. If it's not in the Bible, we're not going to do it. We're not going to teach or do it if it's not in the New Testament. And before you start making snide comments about smartphones and electricity and air conditioning, let's talk about what that means separately, but that's not my main point. Let's talk about Matthew 16 for a minute. Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. What's more important to the church? Is it Peter, or is it the confession that Peter made? You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Which is the foundation of the church? Which is more important for someone to believe? I know Catholic apologists have their response, and they talk about the Aramaic language and all that, but if you had no knowledge of the Aramaic language and you read this in Greek or you read this in English without the specific genders of the nouns and everything involved, you wouldn't think that Peter is the rock on which the church is built. But that aside, let's keep going. But emphasize Christ would build one church. And I'm not arguing that the church is invisible or spiritual, but that's beside the point. The gates of Hades will not prevail against it does not mean there will be historic documentation of the church at every century throughout the history of the past 2,000 years. But we can both agree that whatever church Christ built, that there's going to be Christians in those times, at those centuries. The church did not die out or disappear. But verse 19 is key. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Now, I saw a Protestant make this mistake earlier this week. They think the keys have to do with the binding and loosing. I don't think the keys and the binding and loosing are the same. Now, I might be wrong about that. But think about how Peter had the keys, because the other apostles were told elsewhere, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. So that's not something that's given exclusively to Peter to begin with. And Protestants are right to point that out, and the Bible does make that clear. But what does it mean to have the keys of the kingdom of heaven? Well, Peter was the first to preach to the Jews on the day of Pentecost and to the Gentiles in Caesarea in Acts 10, the household of Cornelius. I believe it was Caesarea. I believe Peter was in Joppa and he traveled to Caesarea. And furthermore, the way that the text reads is, whatever you bind on earth will have been bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will have been loosed in heaven. So the doctrine, the faith is said. It is the faith once for all delivered to the saints. It is not something that people can come along later, claim to have these authority or these keys and begin inventing things. If they're going to, if the apostles here are going to be saying or binding or loosing anything, it's what God has already established and what God is communicating to them because he gave them the promise of the Spirit. That's why we can trust the Bible, because they were moved by the Holy Spirit. There's nothing in this passage that would identify solely the Catholic Church or the papacy as, the church or some aspect of the church that Christ said he would build. And what right do you have to say that someone who has heard the gospel, that Jesus Christ died, buried, and rose again on the third day according to the scriptures, someone who has believed that and repented and turned from their life of sin that came before and turned to God and confessed, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and been baptized for the remission of sins, what right do you have to say, well, they're not a Christian because they deny what my church teaches about the Virgin Mary? If someone is saved, they are a member of that church Christ would establish. If someone is a member of that church that Christ established, they are saved. Don't confuse your institution or what you perceive my institution to be with the church that Jesus Christ promised he would establish and would stand till the end of the age.